Hey y'all, it is A to Z with
Mario.
and Amy. Nothing's
Nothing's
off
off
limits.
limits. It is
Oh,
not.
I
That's
know.
scary for some,
It's
but
scary for me,
we're
but
here. Let's
we're
go.
trying new things.
Let's
All
pick up where
right.
we left off.
I know because I was in the middle of my story, but I have to admit you did cut at a good point because we can't give it all away
No, we
at
cannot.
one time. Like,
No, people got stuff to do. That's
they
one thing
do.
we want to be. We don't want to be a long podcast
I
where
know.
people have to set. Well, you're always going to set intentional time aside, but we don't want you sitting 45, 50 minutes
That's too
aside.
long.
It ain't that deep.
It's not.
So for us, we want to make sure that we're cognizant of that and we'll allow time for you to just accept,
Yeah.
receive what we just communicated, and then be able to engage in dialogue on the back end. So
I agree.
giving it
So,
to you, passing the mic.
hopefully you're caught up to this point with episode 1. If not, that's your business to go back and re-listen to what we talked about. Otherwise, everything we say from this point forward is just not going to make any sense. But to those who have already
Period, Pooh.
came back the
Clock
last
that.
time, thank you. We appreciate it. So, where we left off was me talking about just how gracious my husband was to not I know. To not be all up my business about communicating when I was going to be ready to get us back to 50-50. Even though he trusted me and he took me at my word, that was a little commitment that I set forth, on my end and I
I was a
agreed
little
to.
scared.
Oh God, well he didn't share that with me, but I had like an internal timeline for
Just kidding.
myself and I knew that I wanted to, go through with what I agreed to. And so that was pretty much my thing. I came back to him and was like, finally, after getting all my ducks in a row and, getting my responsibilities taken care of, did share with him, okay, like, I'm ready for us to be back on our 50-50 split.
My responsibilities. Yikes.
Yikes. What do you mean, yikes?
Yikes. So, if I may intercept, I believe that you have this understanding. We all do. When you become married, you become one. But you said a key word. Once I had my responsibilities taken care of. Does my responsibilities come above the overall agreement in which you entered into? One could make the argument that should you enter into we are one agreement if there's still going to be delineations of my responsibilities, etc.
I think so. I think in this scenario where we decided to move and there were going to be amendments to our originally stated 50-50 split and you agree, it is my responsibility to make sure that upon that agreement that I get us back to 50-50.
Agree. But I'm speaking more so as it relates to the delay of getting us back to the 50-50. When there's a delay to getting back to the 50-50 because of outside responsibilities that are independent of us, is that the other person's concern? Because the moment I put a ring on it, if you like it, put a ring on it. The minute I did that, my responsibilities became ours. The yours became shared. The mine became ours. So with that being said, should that have created the delay? Because ultimately, if we take that approach, my outside responsibilities should weigh as heavily as your outside responsibilities. So how does one really decipher who picks up the slack when everyone is so concerned about their outside responsibilities?
Then that's when two consenting adults have a conversation about all those factors before they say yes to it.
Fair. I agree.
I don't believe that one person's plate is necessarily somebody else's responsibility. I do agree that when you are married, one could assume that everything is ours. But if we go back to part 1, in our scenario with our 50-50 split, there are things that are not in ours, and there are things that are in ours. In this case, our living expenses is something that we both share. And so I do believe there can be discussions about which items, categories are a shared concern versus an individual's concern. But good questions for the listeners.
In my experience, this is just my experience, there are more that want a 50-50 split, but they do not feel that a table has been prepared where they can honestly stand up straight, shoulders back, and say we want a 50-50 split without there being some sort of ostracizing as it relates to, are you a man? Are you fully a man? Ostracizing? Oh, thanks for correcting. I'm gonna replace it and say belittling. All right, we'll go on the safe side. See? That's that college degree paying off. I told you it's her show. But is there some belittling there? And more times than not, as men, as males, we carry this macho ego, identity where asking for help or saying, hey, or just being vulnerable is not a welcome approach. So we perceive. Not that the significant other did not create an opportunity for us to be that. But I do believe that where I had to step up was I had to be okay with receiving feedback that your obligations outside of me were more pressing than mine. And that is a grown-up decision that could have led to conflict, that could have led to a step back. But for me, what I realized is, given the current state of where we are, the price is the price. There is certain concessions that must be given. But once we're there, then I am going to also articulate what my outside obligations are. So the 50-50 split is going to always look different, listeners. It's always going to look different. I don't know anyone that's going to be at the end of the day that's just going to be like, yes, I won in a 50-50 split. Well, there's no winners, there's no losers in a 50-50 split. You both are committing to a 50-50 split, more than likely due to being able-minded, able-bodied. And for me, I felt that my wife is smart. My wife has capabilities that can help generate an income that can go beyond her Target shopping that will lessen the load for me and allow me to explore other interests. But ultimately, what we remain connected is that if someone fell on hard times, if someone needed additional support or assistance, it was always understood that that delta would be made up regardless of what prior agreement, which may or may not have been in place.
Yeah. Luckily, that was not our scenario, but we do have that, shared understanding with each other in terms of pulling our own weight. And I like what you said about able body, able mind, that is huge to me, as I shared in part 1, just kind of the way I'm wired. Like, there's no reason to me why I should go from taking care of my living arrangements and my well-being, and then all of a sudden I get with you, and now that's no longer my responsibility and it's all on you. Like I said, I'm not knocking anybody who likes to have a separate dynamic where everything is on one person, but that just ain't me. It's just not me.
Oh, y'all heard it. Clock that, y'all. So I do believe that as males, and maybe sometimes as females, I think in our current state and prior to that, it's understood that males carry the weight. Males are the leaders of the household. Another thing that we engage in with our 50-50 split is I don't control where the money goes. There are shared expenses that are in Amy's names. There are some that are in my name. No rhyme or reason. It's just a matter of we didn't sit down and really have conversation. It was just like, oh, lights in your name. You keep it. All right. There was not much dialogue or back and forth there. But I do invite my male listeners and even my female listeners to this conversation to understand from both sides. As males, I invite you to be vulnerable with your partner. I invite you to share what stressors that may exist before you guys ever became one. And your goal is still to maintain those stressors, but also be ready to embody and encounter those joint stressors. I encounter females to be open to hearing that your man just may not have it all together. Doesn't mean they won't have it one day, but it just means today in that moment when they're communicating that they need support. They need assistance. They don't need to be belittled. They don't need to be or made to feel that they're lesser or there should be a delay. However, when you embark on this beautiful thing called marriage, there is no tally marks. There is no tabs. Her burden is my burden. My burden is her burden. And that's where we remain shared. That's where we remain connected. And that's ultimately where we remain whole, is that she still has outside obligations. Some I may know, some I may not know. I have obligations. Some she may know, some she may not know. But when it comes to doing the business of the LaGrone household, it's always taken care of. So as you can see, as we still work through the complexities as well as the communication as it relates to what we're embarking on in this journey, ultimately it's from a place of love. Ultimately,
I like him a little bit.
A place of just concern and value that we see in each other, because every conversation, when you embark on a 50-50 split, is not always going to be promising. It's not always going to be able to be resolved in that moment. You got to be okay putting things in what we call the parking lot. You got to be okay.
We gotta unpack that on another episode.
Yeah, the parking lot is a different beast. We'll wait on that. But the 50-50 split is truly a strategic maneuver to allow flexibility on both sides to clear up outstanding obligations personally, so the other person is not on the hook for that, so the other person is not feeling the additional weight of that, but also so you're transparent about the baggage that's brought in, but you're also connected to the fact that my baggage should not influence our well-being as one. So our well-being should always take the head and sit at the table, while everything else should be, even if it's on the left side, those are my burdens. On the right side, those are your burdens. But at the end of the day, at the head and the foot of the table is shared burdens, and they always have to be a beginning and end.
I agree. And I do want to double back before we conclude this episode, just about the vulnerabilities and just being honest about where you're at when you're making commitments, such as a 50-50 split. You know, you mentioned the dynamics, you know, one person versus the other. I think, you know, for any relationship, you know, more broadly, you know, that advice that you gave can definitely be implemented across the board with any person who decides to take a long-term commitment with somebody, because when these bills come out, they have to be paid.
They don't care who name's on it. They gonna cut it off.
They will.
You know, if the light bill is in your name, but it ain't paid, they're not gonna say, Mario, we're gonna cut off all the lights that Amy used to leave yours on. So all in all, this advice, and it's purely that they were giving, goes back to everything that you commit to or decommit to in life. It goes beyond just a relationship. It can be a friendship. It can be a partnership. It can be a business dealings, where you want to make sure that there's a clear understanding of outside obligations and responsibilities, but then also what is the priority? What is the condition precedent that will make everyone conjoined at a central function, to where we know that these items, these line items, these things have to be taken care of. But it also, as you mentioned, it always goes back to communication. But there are a lot of marriages that are broken up because finances didn't work out. There are communication, some because of communication. But ultimately, you know, when you trace that back and you break that down, it probably goes back, probably, I don't want to give advice and say 100% certainty, but probably it's because maybe there was a barrier to sharing and communicating earlier because it was bad news. So all of that, welcome the bad news, take the good and the bad, understand every day is not going to be Kit Kats and rainbows, but know that any commitment, whether it's marriage, friendship, family, all of the above, that you gotta be willing to understand and allow someone to be vulnerable and allow them to be that free without judgment. And also move to respond from a place of resolution versus asking questions as to why. Ask more targeted questions as to how can we overcome.
That's a little deep.
I didn't want to go there,
but you did.
That is the 50-50 split conversation. I just want to reiterate that it's deeper than marriage, but where it's probably most shunned upon is in marriage. But
I agree. I mean, there are raised eyebrows if I pull out my card at a restaurant before you do. There, I'm sure, are why is your man not paying for everything?
And I don't care. Pull it out. Swipe.
I don't want him to pay for
And
everything.
he does not want to pay.
Like, for real. Like,
real for.
Like, look at me sideways all you want to. Like,
Period. Pooh.
There's no judgment over here. But to wrap it all up, this was part 2 of the 50-50 conversation that we had. Short? Yeah, we cutting it short.
Got 2 minutes.
We said we're not going to belabor the point.
All
you know?
right,
We
close it
already
out.
had 18 closes at this point. Might
Let's
as well
do it.
wrap it up. But this is A to Z with
Mario
and Amy. Nothing's off limits.